Welcome to MamaFuel, the podcast that fuels every mama's heart, soul, mind, and body, and hopefully sparks a few dreams along the way. I'm Ann Ferguson, Chief Nurturer and Mama Mentor at the Centered Mama Project, and your host for this podcast. I'll be sharing real, raw, and often funny conversations with beautiful mamas from around the world to remind you that you're not alone and that you're doing amazingly on this wild journey of shepherding small humans as they make their way on our beautiful planet. Let's get started. Hey, gorgeous one. It is Anne, and welcome to today's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. This month, I want to do a little bit of something different. This month, I'm going to be focusing on self-love, which is something that's had a lot of airplay and print space and pixels because it's really, really important. And it's something that we don't tend to do that well as women, and particularly as mothers, because we spend so much time giving to everyone else and not so much for ourselves. And that is part of what is behind the whole reason for being, la raison d'être of MamaFuel, the podcast. And it is the same thing for particularly this month of October, where I will be focusing on self-care in some ways that might feel a little bit surprising or kind of taboo. And I'm excited to both feature important conversations that I have had with women whom I deeply love, and also things that are coming out of my heart and experience and mind, because I think about all of this all the time. And I think about you all the time and wonder how this is landing and how you're feeling and how you're doing. And I've heard from you that these podcasts are helping provide encouragement and helping provide ideas and support and love. And I'm thrilled beyond belief. And if that is you, I would love you to go on to thecenteredmamaproject.com and follow the instructions there on the /podcast page. Follow the instructions there to leave a review on iTunes. iTunes loves reviews, and it helps the podcast get into more mamas' ears. And we're nearing 2,000 downloads of MamaFuel, the podcast, around the world. And I am so excited. And grateful to every one of you listening, because it tells me that this is an important conversation, and it's not just me who thinks that that is the case. The other reason that I wanted to come on and do a brief intro in addition to the one I usually do today is because for years, and I will have talked about this in previous podcast episodes, if you've been listening, you'll already have heard me talk about this, and my voice is quivering a little bit because this matters so much to me. For years, I have had this tug at my pant leg of, can you please put together a community that mamas can come into and be held? Because we as moms spend so much time holding other people, loving them, caring for them, showing up in all different ways. We're the provider, maybe. We are the carer. We are the confidant. We are the problem fixer. We are all of these things, the friend. But who and when takes good care of us? Where can we lay down our hearts in a place where we can really, really connect with other like-minded women to have relationships that foster us and really nurture us? You may have a bajillion friends or a really close-knit, tight circle, small circle of friends who do this for you. And if you do, then I celebrate you. And I also know that that's not the case for everybody. We're super busy is a word I hate, but we are. We've got lots going on. And there are 1,000,001 reasons that we give ourselves when we let ourselves down, when we make promises to ourselves that we will go to bed earlier, or that we will make time for that friend or that walk or that bath. And we let ourselves down consistently and constantly because we put other people first. And that nudge, that pull at my pant leg that has been, hey, mamas need this space. We need this space to come together and to be honest about how we're feeling and to celebrate the amazing stuff that we might not feel comfortable celebrating with people who are in our immediate day-to-day life. Just like we need places to talk about the wobbles we're having in our relationships or with our kids or with ourselves or with our weight or our jobs or whatever. That place is a place that maybe some of you have, but a lot of us don't. And so I finally have done it, and my voice is quivering and a bit scratchy because this is a big deal for me. I've created the MamaFuel Sisterhood, and I have already welcomed 6 beautiful souls into what I'm calling the Founder Circle. And I would love for you to join us. in the month of October, I'm welcoming in those of you who'd like to come and check it out and see how it feels. I will keep that option open until the 14th of October. So if you're listening to this after the 14th of October and you're called to join the sisterhood, then get in touch with me. And if you're called to join the sisterhood anytime, you're going to have to get in touch with me. And the email address is Anne, ANNE, at MamaFuel, MAMAFUEL.me, because we all need fuel, right? So that's Anne, ANNE, at MamaFuel.me. Or you can go into the virtual village, the Centered Mama Project's virtual village, and message me directly there on Facebook. And I will happily let you in for a little tour to see what's going on as we are crafting together this amazing community of support so that those of us who tend to be leaders in other places, be it in our community, be it in our business and our family, get a place to come and rest and be held and loved and witnessed and celebrated. If this speaks to you, I would love to hear from you. There are only a few spots left, and it's something that is very near and dear to my heart. It's also something that I've wanted to make super accessible. So if this speaks to you, the price is $25 a month for the Founders Circle. That price will go up in January when I open the doors again. And the full price for the year is $300, but if you join for the full year in advance, it's $275. That's American dollars, which is way less than $1 a day. I haven't even done the math, but $25 a month is way less than $1 a day. And then if you remove that 1 month for free that you get for joining for the full year, it's a no-brainer. I'd love to have you join us, and I would love to have you come in as my guest until the 14th of October, have a look around, see how it feels, meet the other mamas. And if you decide to stay, then we will be delighted to have you. So without any further ado, I would love to introduce today's guest, who I introduce anyway when I start the conversation, like I always do. But Elena Lipson is the woman who started me on this journey of self-care. She brands herself as your divine self-care mentor. And she is, wow, she walks the walk. She is amazing, inspiring in her actions, in her words, in her teachings. She is accessible and kind and warm and real. And I adore her. So much so that I think I'm probably going to start working with her again, because my self-love can always use a tune-up, right? You never stop learning. So I'm thrilled to present to you today Elena Lipson, who is my first guest in this month's series on self-love. Can't wait to hear what you think about it. Let's get started. Hello, and welcome to today's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. As ever, I am so thrilled to have you here. My name is Anne Ferguson. I'm your host for today's podcast and all of the podcasts on MamaFuel. And I'm super excited, as ever, to introduce you to my guest today. Her name is Elena Lipson, and she has a really special place in my heart because she really was the very first person on my journey towards self-love and self-care. She was taking me from a place of total, full-on, constant martyrdom as a mama, as an employee, as a partner, as in all the things, and really helped to show me the way to take care and time for myself in a way that didn't feel like I was taking away from other people. So I credit Elena with really starting me down a path that has changed my life and continues to change my life, because a lot of the lessons Elena taught me, I'm still learning 4 years later. But hey, that's part of the process. So rather than tell you any more about Elena and how amazing she is, I'm delighted to welcome you, Elena. Thank you for coming and talking to us today.
Thank you. This is so fun. I'm having a little bit of like a full circle moment. I'm so proud of you. I'm so excited for you. And I love this work that you're doing. It's everything. So excited to be here.
Oh, well, thank you. Yes. I received that very gratefully. Something else you taught me to say thank you. I received that and take beautiful compliments into my heart. So note to anyone whose earbuds were gracing today, that's a big one. It's when I try to teach my kids, just say thank you and stop talking. I received that.
That's a life-changing ritual practice, because that, as you know, women are so quick to brush off the compliments, the littlest ones, even like, I love your scarf. Oh, this old thing. Like, oh, whatever. It's just so strange how when you start noticing it, that's a definite life-changing practice that I teach, I practice, and it's awkward as anything when you first start it.
Totally.
I actually have taken it to a new level, and you'll really like this one. It's like thank you. I received that. It's true. And people are like, what did you just say? But, you have to be playful with it. You have to just feel it in your body. So that's a good one. You just do that, nothing else. Then our job is done here.
I know, right? And sometimes I'll say, thank you. I received that. More, please. Yes. And then these people just look at me like, you're a total loopy loop. What are you talking about? Thank you. I received that. More, please. Yeah.
It's funny. I was walking with my son the other day. Last week we were leaving he takes these enrichment classes because we homeschool, and we're walking down the stairs and the weather was this perfect fishing weather. And he's like, oh, this weather is perfect. We're going to go fishing today. I'm like, I know this. Like, you couldn't have asked for a better weather for today. He's like, thank you, more, please. And I just had this moment like, oh, I've been doing so long that it's just in him now. He does it. And so for me, that's part of what I teach, is to be that person that you want your kid to envision being. And, it's not so much about teaching them directly because, kids are like, whatever. Yeah. But doing it and being it, I can see the influence. And I think that's more important than anything else, is to really, because kids can see through the BS when you're just totally not living it. They're like, well, you're not doing it. And you're telling me to be calm. You're telling me to take a deep breath. You take a deep breath, especially because I have a 12-year-old now and he's pretty savvy. He's like, well, why aren't you doing it? So
totally. So let's take a big step back and tell us a little bit about what your life looks like right now.
Yeah. So right now it's funny because I just recorded a 3-series podcast reflecting on this last year of homeschooling and entrepreneurship. And it's been just a great thing to do in general, to sit back and just reflect on the past and how I got there, and really claim what I created and claim the parts that didn't feel so wonderful in the moment, and how I want to shift that, and how I want to move, how I want to move forward. And just really understand the process. So right now I have a 12-year-old son, and we are currently homeschooling, which I never in a million years thought I would say ever, ever, ever. But here we are. And I have this business. It's the Divine Self-Care Circle program. And I have some beautiful complementary programs that go with that, like rituals, 66 sacred rituals and 21 days of self-care. But the heart of my work is this women's community that's now in its 4th year and growing and evolving and refining. And that's how you and I met, of course. And I host these retreats with I have another business with 2 other partners where we host retreats called the Sacred CEO Retreat, which is really a beautiful complement to the work I do, because it's all about being the sacred CEO in your life and in your work, and really standing up straight in your purpose and allowing you to be in community. So I have that business. I have my business. I have been married. We've been together for almost 19 years now, and married for almost 16 years. I always have to do that little math bubble. But we met, back in California. Obviously, we were younger and we were sort of not knowing where this journey was going to take us, like everyone else.
Sure.
Here we are. We met in California, but we're living in Washington State now, which is, as I look out my window, it's super green. There was like a ton of deer this morning and bunnies. And actually, the bunnies are a little more downhill, but it's very nature-based, very grounding. It's, as a New York City girl, where I grew up, is very different from how I grew up. And so we very consciously and mindfully chose this life pace and lifestyle for our family. And it's been just a huge blessing for me, as nature is my medicine. I literally walk out the door and be in the middle of a forest with no sounds in just a minute. So I'm down by the lake. We have this beautiful lake down the hill, and so it's a big, big part of our lives is where we live. Yeah. And I host these sort of VIP days and virtual retreats. So all my work revolves around women becoming their top priority, their top asset in life, in business, and the bedroom.
Cha-ching! And ba-boom!
And I love talking about it. I spent a long time in the hustle mode, in the sort of hyper creative mode, which honestly I think is totally normal. I was in my 20s. I was creating. I was having having enough energy and time and space to do everything I wanted to do. But it eventually, once I learned what my cycles and rhythms were, I realized that I was actually not working to my best rhythm and cycle. And so I ended up with autoimmune issues and burnout. And I can see it in so many of the women who are drawn to working with me. They have these weird autoimmune symptoms, and their bodies just doesn't feel right. And they're low energy, and they're just, it's like a whole holistic perspective on what's happening with my body and how can I now change it. And so for me, once I had my son, it sort of like, when a train is going really, really fast and then it stops all of a sudden and everything just goes whoosh, everything moves inside and things are all jumbled. That's kind of how I felt, because I'd been going so fast and I'd never really taken time off. Even when he was born, I worked right up until he was born. And then when he was just a few months old, I started my first online business, and I had baby in one arm and typing and building my business with the other, and figuring it all out. And so I never really stopped. And so my body, within those first few years of having a baby, moving to a new state, not having the family support around me except for my husband, who was amazing, being lack of sleep, and then I started experiencing my symptoms more acutely, and that's where I started really, really into my self-care journey, which was, something's not working. I don't want to be the cranky, tired, emotional, moody mom. Something's going on here. I need to shift things around. And I really started going back to my yoga practice and physical practices, and learned a lot about what I was doing that wasn't optimal. And after really healing myself and working on that for a few years is when I decided to start the self-care mission that I have now, is because I believe that moms are doing some of the most important work, which is, really nurturing the next generation.
Totally.
Really the next wave of how we're going to be in this world. So it's a lot of responsibility.
It is. And I would love to know, it's something that I talk about when I'm teaching yoga, but also when I'm working with moms, either one-to-one or in groups, is, listen to your body, because she is talking to you all the time. And we have lost our capacity to listen to our bodies, because from a very young age, the big people are telling us, put a sweater on, it's cold. And my little one is always like, but I'm hot. Why do I want to wear a sweater? And I learned eventually to stop telling her to put a sweater on. I still catch myself sometimes. And sometimes I don't. I don't catch it. But I'll say, like, put on a jacket, it's cold. And the pushback comes pretty strongly now because she's getting bigger. And we learn when we're really small that we can't trust ourselves, because the big people around us are constantly telling us, no, it's not like that. It's going to be like this. You need to do this. I know better because I'm the big animal and you're the small animal, and you'll do what I say because this is how I feel. And so and it's not malicious, right? It's protective. It comes from mostly a good place, I think, for most people. But the result is that we as beings, men and women, we have lost the capacity to connect with and hear our bodies when they talk to us. And so they whisper. I say this often, your body whispers, and if you don't listen, she'll start speaking. And if you don't listen, she'll start shouting. And if you don't listen, you'll end up like me in the emergency ward, fighting for your life, not knowing if you're going to see your kids again. There's no, this is serious stuff we're talking about. It isn't, I can just keep going, or I can just get less sleep, or I can just, I'll catch up at some point, or people will sort of blithely say, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Well, not really. And that's not is that really a gamble that you're willing to take? Is that the stakes are potentially really high. Autoimmune disease is no joke. And I know a lot of moms who have huge struggles with autoimmune disease, and you're one of them. And one of your partners is also one of them. And there are other people in various communities that I'm part of who will talk about having a fibromyalgia flare, or they'll have, in the UK, they talk about ME, and it's fibromyalgia as well, and various other things, Crohn's that flares up and other things. And it doesn't serve us, does it?
No, and I'll tell you, even MS and arthritis and diabetes, they're all autoimmune issues. And I'll tell you what, my thinking about this is starting to evolve a little bit. Okay, I've been saying this over and over and over and over again. There's something else happening here. And I think ultimately the whole thing about autoimmune is what the doctors say when they don't know what the heck is going on with your body, right? So they start categorizing it. And then of course you can categorize the symptoms. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to go down this path of this is what I think at all. What I'm saying is, just like what you said, when we don't listen to our bodies, it whispers and then louder and louder and louder. And then it gets your attention. And then you're like, oh my God, I have things to change in my life. And I really think that we as a species, as a modern human, don't change anything until we're in pain, right? Mm-hmm. So that's sort of how we've evolved. We're like, oh, this hurts, I'll move it. And so we don't hear it until it's really loud because we're so distracted by other things.
Yes.
The reason we don't trust our kids in their body is because we have forgotten how to listen to ourselves in our body. We spend so much time in our mind, in our head, trying to succeed and figure it out and getting it right and blah, 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 and social indoctrination. It has to be this way. This is normal. Oh my God. Like we're so in our heads that when our kids say, I'm not hot, you're like, well, of course you're hot because it's hot, or you're cold. I acutely remember my mom telling me that I should bring a jacket, and I'm like, I am not cold, or put on a jacket. I'm not cold, Mom. Yeah. Yes, you are. I'm really not cold. Like
I'm right here. I'm right here.
I remember that moment of like feeling in my body, am I supposed to be cold right now? Like what is happening? And I remember being told, don't cry, or it's okay to cry. I'm like, I'm not going to cry, or I really want to cry. I can remember being told that. And, I'm not being down on my mom. My mom was doing the best that she could with what she had. And I really feel like we're given the parents for a reason, that we're supposed to learn things. And so me as a parent of this really hyper conscious and aware kid, which I think a lot of our kids are right now, like we are raising kids who are not just going with it. They're like really questioning us and pushing us, and they're stubborn and they know themselves really well. And like, this is all the kids I know. They're all like this. They're like, I know myself. This is what I want. This isn't going to work. You can, of course, beat it out of them, not physically beat it out of them, but mentally you can really
work it out of them.
Not listen. And I don't think that's for their best.
No.
But I think, again, back to what I said. Well, right, exactly. No, for sure. But I think that it's this reframing of parenting, that we are not here to just relive or fix our mistakes, or just, because if I hear myself saying to my son, well, when I was this age, I did this. Like, I already know I'm coming from a place of trying to heal something for myself that I maybe haven't quite learned from yet, or haven't made peace with yet. And so even just this morning, my husband and I were talking yesterday, and we're like, what do you think we're going to do? Because with this homeschooling thing, it has really, like, parenting is this spiritual journey of reflection. And you can just, if you're present with yourself, and you can see and hear your own reactions, maybe not even in the moment, but you're like noticing, okay, something's off here. Let me at least put a little like pin in this so I can come back to it later and reflect on it. Because so even just yesterday, we were thinking, because my son said, I think I'm going to try high school, like actual high school for high school, which is like 2 years away. So it's not even right now. We're projecting into the future. And if you asked me a year ago, I wouldn't have known that we were going to be homeschooling. So a lot changes. So getting obsessed about 2 years from now, I already know is not good for me, because we're not there. We're here. We're going to do it now. We're going to reflect 6 months from now, and then again 6 months from now. But my husband said, he started going on this thing of like, well, I think he shouldn't do high school, and he should have this, like, you're an entrepreneur. You should, he didn't say you should. He's like, I would think you would appreciate more doing something different or outside the box, or having him we have this program called Running Start, where they do 2 years of high school, and then they start taking classes towards their associate's degree, which is like the first level of their, bachelor's degree. It's really cool. I was like, or we can do this. Or he started giving these ideas. And I found myself just on alert. I'm like, don't put your story on him. You didn't like high school. What if he likes it? He needs to have the social. I started going there, And I
getting in the mud.
Had this out of body experience of like, why am I so triggered right now? Why am I like, no to you, yes to me, no? Like, I just started putting off these walls, and that was pretty much it. And I sort of we had this conversation. We talked it through, and I'm like, well, that's a couple of years away. Let's not even go there. And this morning, I put a pin in it, because I'm like, that didn't feel right. I don't think I was fully what I was saying. And then this morning, I did my morning practice, which is a big part of what I teach to get embodied. Because if you just roll out of bed and hop right to work, you are basically in reactive mode. Yeah. If you do what I teach, which is magic morning practice, which is to get aligned with your mind, body, and soul, with some movement, with some sort of meditation, with some sort of journaling, then you're actually clear and present. And so as I was going through this process this morning, this little thing was hovering above me. Like, what was that about? Why did you get so reactive? Why did you just shut him down that way? Like, what was that? And I thought, well, I was scared because what if I teach him to go down this entrepreneurial path and it's so hard. And what if he doesn't, like, all my fears were coming up. What if he just should do like the regular thing, go to high school, get a job, be happy, have the 401k, like, like really have the normal thing. I was coming out of my own fear, because being an entrepreneur is a spiritual journey too. And it's a process, right? Like the money and the ideas and this, like, it's the whole thing. So my own fears around it were coming up for him. It's like, I want him to be entrepreneurial. Even if he gets a job, I want him to think outside the box. I want him to be creative. I want him to be someone who evolves. But again, that's me wanting for him. What if he really is saying, I just want to be a police officer, which he does say right now, like, this is what I want to do. And I'm going to be like, what if that's what he wants? I cannot consciously, as a human being, change his trajectory. I can try, but it's not going to be good. It's going to end up creating friction for us, for him, whatever, right? So for me, and I called my husband this morning and I said, I just want you to know I thought more about what we talked about yesterday, and I see what you were saying, and I appreciate what you were saying. And I realized that I was coming from a place of fear. Like, I projected way into the future without even knowing it. In the blip of a second, I was like, whoosh, what if he has to go through some of my hardest moments? But then I realized, well, what if he gets to go through some of my best moments?
Yeah.
Making amazing income, having the freedom, being able to travel, like being abundant in our family. Like, wow, what if he gets that side of it? What if he's really looking at it? Or anything in between? What if he sucks? What if he's amazing? Or anything in between? But that's my story. So all I can be is a conscious mom to say, okay, this was my moment of projecting. I can take a step back and I can have a conversation with him. Like, here are your options. This is what it could look like. This is what high school could look like. Here's whatever. And I could just stay engaged in the process with him so that I can be an advisor. I can be a mentor. I can be an observer, right? Like, let him have his own journey.
Yeah. So, two things come up when you're talking about that. One is this terror that I think we as moms all have, which is of being blamed somewhere down the road for having made a decision or guided a child in a way that in fact was, in air quotes, wrong for them from where they're sitting. And to get to the place of, because you made this decision, or you made me go to high school, or you made me not go to high school, or you made me do this entrepreneurial thing, or you made me take this dance class, or you made me whatever, if the child's not owning their own experience, then it becomes your fault. And we take that on. I certainly remember very early on starting to come into huge anxiety that I hadn't ever felt in my life. And it happened when I became a mom. So going on 11 years ago. And it was this absolute abject terror of, what if I do something wrong and something happens to her and it's my fault? And it was from a place of really severe postnatal depression that was undiagnosed. And then what followed after that was PTSD and, from various other things happening in my life. But, and it still, it still lingers, and it's a thing that it's a very real, like you said, you projected to like miles at 35, and oh my gosh, what if when he's 35, he'll have had to go through all these horrible experiences and all of these difficult times, etc. And as you say, the counterbalance to that is, well, it's like in the movie Finding Nemo, well, what if he goes out there, Dory, and that, things could happen to him. And she says, well, but if he doesn't go out there, nothing's going to happen to him. And you see the dad go, oh, and so that's something I hear often from moms, is that pressure, that huge pressure we put on ourselves to get all the things right, especially the big decisions. Like, we've just been through a round of choosing school, and in Geneva, it's not possible to homeschool your child. In some parts of Switzerland, you can, but in Geneva, you can't unless you're a licensed teacher and you follow the curriculum. So child-led learning is just not even like an option. But it depends on which, they're called cantons, but which states in Switzerland you live in. So there are some where you can homeschool your child, but those kids still have to do the exams multiple times throughout the year to show that you're still following the curriculum and you're still doing all the things. And it doesn't really allow for following curiosity. And so when you were talking about that fear and then turning it on its head and coming back to your husband and saying, I can see where you're coming from, what came up for me was, how fear stamps out curiosity. And these are, your child is taking chances every day, and that is good and healthy within a certain context. And I say you, I mean everyone listening and myself included, like reminder to self, my girls are taking chances every day, and that is healthy and beautiful in a safe container that I can hold for them, or that their school can hold for them, or that different activity scenarios can hold for them. And then they'll take chances that we're not holding the space for. And that's, as we fought to get free and live our experiences, they will do the same. And it's their journey, right? And how can we accompany them and be curious? And I would love to know how that's been for you in this almost full circle year now of homeschooling Miles for the first time. Like how have you played with curiosity, that edge between fear and curiosity?
And it's funny because I don't know if you listen to the episodes or not, but that's what I play with quite a bit. One of the steps in the reflection piece was really embracing the fact that there's going to be tremendous joy and there's going to be tremendous self-doubt, and that both are part of the journey. And that really applies to everything, because I'll bring it back full circle. The more I live in that fear and self-doubt place, the more I'm going to try to control the circumstances and try to create some weird perception. I'm going to tie two more things in because it's really important. And as I reflected on my journey of the homeschooling thing, for me, it brought up all of my resistance, all of my stories around what homeschooling is, what our life is, what my work is. And I was so lucky. And I don't know if you know Jenny Fennick, and I mention her again because she was someone who really took time to talk with me when I was on the edge of oh my gosh, I can't believe we're doing this. Can I even do this? And she's someone who's been homeschooling for several years, and she homeschools 3 kids and runs a business very similar to what I do. And she asked me one question, which has helped me to reframe a lot of things, which I'm a coach. I know how to ask the questions, but sometimes you need another coach to ask you a good question, which is why I believe in having coaches. She said, how could you homeschool and have a business that is thriving even more? And I'm like, okay. That created a new picture in my head of wow, what if homeschooling grew my business
instead of restricting it?
Yeah, or even the stories. Because I remember when I was pregnant with my son, I was just sort of I was running my coaching business. I was getting ready to leave my corporate work, and I was getting ready to move to a new state. And I had this story in my head that I couldn't do it all. Because it was too much. And honestly, probably was too much.
It was a lot, for sure.
It was a lot, for sure. But I couldn't reframe it enough at the time. I didn't want to hear it. My coach at the time said, well, what if you, basically hired another coach to take your clients for a year, they give you an affiliate commission, you still stay in the game, and then when your son is about a year, you can reframe again. You can decide what you want to do. And I just had this really my sort of stomp my feet moment. And I'm you don't know. I'm at this moment, I couldn't reframe it in the moment enough to say what's possible. Curiosity wasn't even on the table. I was in full fear mode. This parenting thing is going to be so hard and so crazy. I don't even know what if and what if and what if and what if. It's almost like I went to the dark side of curiosity instead of the light side of curiosity.
Horribleizing instead of potential.
Yes, exactly. And so I ended up sort of closing my coaching business around that time, not knowing how I was going to reopen it. And I didn't reopen it again until he was, I don't know, 4 years ago. So he was about 10 or no, he's 12 now. So 8, something like that. So I was doing my business in a different way because I didn't know, I couldn't reframe it at the time to say, what if I did it my way? So I'm really curious now in a different way than I was before. And this one question helped me to reframe, what if it could be amazing? What if it would be really spacious? What if you started releasing some of the obligations that you don't have to do? What if you could, so really spending time in that space has helped me to dream for myself and to help me embody the curiosity and to create from a place of trust. And something that was coming up when you were talking, which ties in here, which is you can what if yourself into either direction, right? You can have that dark side of curiosity or the bright side of curiosity. But the key piece, I think, for myself has been to know that it's going to be a journey, know that there's going to be some moments where I'm what do we just do? But also trust. If I can create a practice around trusting my own intuition, around trusting myself, around being grounded in like my head and my body instead of going to that place of fear quickly. Mm-hmm. I can decide that I don't know what's going to happen. I'm not a fortune teller. I can make a decision right now to homeschool, to run my business, to be mindful, to get the support that I need, to make sure that my husband is very clear on what my expectations are and I'm very clear on his. It really sort of invited us into a deeper connection with each other. Mm-hmm. And a good example is when we first started, I was teaching my son math, and I just have a not so good relationship with math from my school years. And it's unfortunate because I wish I had a better one. I just sort of became the typical like, oh, I just love reading and writing. I'm very creative. Math is not my thing. So I sort of went that way, which I don't think has to be for girls. I think girls can be taught math in a way that's much more embodied for them.
Yeah.
And I see that a lot more now. And I wish I had that. Maybe I could relearn it myself. When I started having my own business, I do my business math the way it feels good for me. So I have relearned it in some ways, but I literally was like crying in the shower about it. I'm like, oh, I can't do this math with him. I'm going to mess him up. He's not going to know it. I don't want to do this. Like I just went to this place, but then I realized, you know what? I really don't want to do it. I don't want to go back and relearn math. I have things that I want to do. And I'm like, I just kind of got very clear on it from a place of clarity versus fear. And I said, I don't want to go down this math road. I want to make sure he gets a good education in math, and I'm not going to be the one to give that to him. So who is? And so my husband's like, well, it's easy for me. I'm like, great, it's yours.
Bye-bye.
So I gave him the whole thing. And I said, I don't want to touch it. It's yours. If he needs to do something or whatever, I can sort of guide him, but I just don't want to go down that road with him. I will take up these other pieces. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I did that, I was like, great, that feels better. Instead of trying to take it on when I really didn't want to, pushing myself to resent the process, honestly, it takes time to study math so you can teach someone else.
Totally. It totally does. And you just said a magical word, which is resentment. And resentment to me is a flag. It's information, right? It's not danger, but it's information. And it's information to me that, oh, hang on a second, either I'm making up a story about something, and I will catch myself sometimes saying to the girls, like I'll say, I've just been driving you around, or I've been, blah, I'm happy to do all of these things for you, but blah, de blah. And then I think, hang on a second, mama, this is my stuff and this isn't about them. And well, if you don't want to do it, then either just don't own it and don't do it. Say, I'm not doing this. I don't feel like driving you around 5 times a week to do whatever while you argue in the car. So we're not going to do that anymore. So we're going to stop doing all these activities. And there have been times where we just haven't gone because I've just said, you know what? No, I have things I want to do for me. I want space, or I just want no arguments, or let's just take the pressure out. And it happens maybe once a week, sometimes for weeks in a row. And that's something that I learned from you, that permission to get aligned, which is a really woolly word, isn't it? But to live how I actually want to feel versus to live from a place of shoulding all over myself. Yeah. Should-ing. I'll just repeat that slowly. Should-ing all over myself. And that resentment is such a flag for me. And when I start, like you said, when you start talking about your childhood and it's bringing things up that need healing, the amount of stuff that is coming up for me in this period of mothering is encyclopedic in its in its richness and its variety, and yet that resentment piece is one that is such a flag, and is also something that I play with. And I'd really love to dig in a little bit with you. Because when you said that you were homeschooling your son, I felt this like compression in my chest. I was like, oh my God. And I think about, I solo mom most of the time. We have a dog, big needs, 2 amazing girls, no family around, house, yada, yada, all the shoulds, right? And to me, I'm not sure that I have the resources to homeschool a couple of kids, even though I would love to give them a child-led learning experience. Mm-hmm. How did you navigate that journey of going from really successful entrepreneurship, a balance that you and your husband had achieved. He works irregular hours. He has shift work. You had a son at school. You had all of these things that you were balancing to suddenly, like you said, to suddenly getting to this place where he was home a lot and your husband's still working shift work. And so does that mean that you're the main responsible person for his education? What happens to your business? Does space expand or contract? Does your chest expand or contract? How's that process? And what I will do is I'll link to your episodes of your podcast in the show notes so people can go listen to you, because you've got such amazing value and you give so much through that vehicle. But can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this is exactly what I covered in episodes 1, 2, and 3. And so the very first step of deciding about the homeschooling thing, and I know this has sort of become about homeschooling, but it's such a good metaphor for my life and what has evolved into big permission granting and rewriting things our way. So the first step was hell no. So when we talked about homeschooling, I'm like, hell no. That's not us. We're not doing that. I love my time alone. Yeah. I need my time I became like a mama bear for my business.
Totally.
Like, there is no freaking way I am going to be I just went into this hell no mode, and I stayed there for a while until I decided to question it. Okay, well, what is it? That's when I had that conversation with Jenny and started really wondering and into that space of curiosity of like, wow, what if this could be the greatest thing ever? And what I did, which I sort of do this in my kind of really quick internal process, excuse me, is to understand that this time of my son's childhood is so fleeting.
Yes.
And that I was already starting to sense how quickly the time was going. Like, oh, there's middle school. Oh, there's high school. Oh, there's college, and off it goes. Like, oh my gosh. I call them rubber band moments where you're like in the moment and then you stretch the rubber band as far as your sort of fear takes you, you know, pop back in the moment. And then you're like, oh, wait a minute. And what it gives you, that rubber band moment, is like a perspective. Oh, okay. And I remember thinking this when my son was really little too, where, I think I can't remember who called it the longest days and the shortest years of the kid's childhood, because it really feels that way. Like, this day will never end.
Yeah.
Ever. And I have to do it again tomorrow and again the next day and again. Like, oh, there's going to be a million diapers. And now
and the nights and the whole,
all of it. And the best advice that I can't remember whether I thought of it myself or someone else said it, it doesn't even matter. It was that everything you love and everything that frustrates you is a phase. It could be a 1-week phase, a 2-week phase, a 6-month phase, but the more you can be present for it, you just understand it's going to be over. They're not going to be sleeping with you forever. They're not going to be in diapers forever. They're not going to be needing you to pick them up forever. And there's going to be a day when you look back and be like, oh my God, I just want to hold you. And they're like, see you, Mom. So
and you're bigger than me.
Yeah. And I'm like, I get emotional thinking about it, because that's what really shifted the perspective around really everything that we do together. But the homeschooling, the business, the marriage, like, wow, we are in this moment. How incredible is this? What if it could be our way? What am I fearing? Like, what is this social indoctrination that I'm sort of been programmed with, that I think that this is the only way it has to be? And it made me reflect on other areas of our life that before I had a kid, I thought extended breastfeeding was weird. I thought sleeping with your kid was weird. I thought a lot of things that we ended up doing were really weird, and just like, oh, I can't believe she's doing that. That's not right,
Totally, all the things you know about being a mom until you become a mom.
Yes, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, maybe there's some wisdom there. And so we ended up extended breastfeeding. We ended up having him sleep in our bed. We ended up moving like somewhere totally different for our lifestyle. Yeah. And we were critiqued quite a bit by our family and friends, and mostly because they were sad to see us go. But I remember having this conversation with my brother-in-law about the homeschooling thing, and I was already pretty confident in my decision. But he said, like, oh, something like negative about it, and then you need to think of your son first. And I just had this moment of like, what? Oh, right. I never thought of that. Thanks for your input.
So much.
And then it became sort of comedic. I'm like, everyone's going to have their opinion. Everyone's going to have their perspective. But as long as and this is one of the things I talked about in the podcast, was I if I can get to a place of deep, deep-seated trust in our family and why we're doing this and get very clear, I don't need to explain it to anyone. I don't need to defend myself. I don't need to put out a flyer. I don't need to do anything. I just need to check in with myself, with my son, with my husband, with us as a family. And that sort of is like my banner, my frame of reference of it's our life, our way, we're living it, we get to decide. And if we mess him up, great, I'll participate in paying for his therapy later. Like, he'll be fine. He's good. Lots of amazing families do things crazy, beautiful ways. They sail around the world for school. They do online school. They do homeschool. They do this kind of school, that school. Like, all of it is fine if it's done consciously, if it's done, even if it's a mistake. So be it. So be it. You can look back 5 years from now and say, well, that was a big mistake. Wow.
What did we learn?
Yes, because the reason we started homeschooling is because the school we chose for him so consciously, so mindfully, moved here for it, wasn't working anymore.
Wow.
So I can sit and, basically berate myself all day long for making a mistake. Oh, wow, how could I not have seen this? Why didn't we look at something else? How blah, blah, blah. I can do that all day long. Or I can say, well, it was working when it was working. Maybe we stayed a little long trying to make it work, but then we changed. And that's all you can do. You can't live looking back, bump into the wall. You can't do that. And you can't live so far into the future that you're missing the present. So for me, my biggest prayer, my biggest affirmation that I've sort of settled in on is, please let me just be present for this day. Let me be present for every conversation, for every moment. And when I start losing track of that, please let me get back into my body and be present for this precious gift of a moment. And as long as I can do that, I know that I'll be able to make the best intuitive decision for myself, for my business, for my family. And that's it. What else are you going to do? Right?
If you do that, that's already amazing, right?
That's it. And I really love the word alignment, because I think we can feel when we're not aligned. It's like this. Like yesterday in the conversation, I knew in that moment that I was coming from fear, and I knew I would have to come back to it and sort of, reckon with myself of where it was coming from. And sometimes you can't see in the moment why it's coming up for you. You just have to have a process around reflecting.
Yeah.
Which, I forgot who said it, but like a life that isn't, I'm going to totally massacre this saying, but it's something about, a life that isn't lived in reflection is a life that's missed, or something like that. So I think we have to build in reflection points in our life, which is why the Magic Morning Practice is the thing that I've been teaching for the longest, is the thing that's most transformational, is the most simple and most difficult thing to stick with, right? Because I remember we had moments where I'm like, so when was the last time you did a Magic Morning Practice? And you're like, oh my God, it's been a month. Right. So and I've multiple. Yeah. And I've gotten off track too, where I'm like, oh, wait a minute, I didn't do that yesterday. And so I'm confused about what I'm thinking. Let me get back to my alignment practice. And so I really do like the word alignment, even though it can seem a little like, what does that mean? Well, it means that you are taking time to reflect, and the actions that you're taking are I'm going to say in alignment, but that doesn't make sense, but they are in line with what you want to be living and how you want to be living. And if they're not, then it's okay to pause and say, I'm not sure yet. I need another few days to reflect. Let me get back to you, instead of making a decision out of confusion. So, no. I don't know if I answered your question, but that was a lot.
Yeah, no. But that's what I love about these conversations in the podcast, is that I have a general sense of why I want various guests to come on and the kinds of things that I'd love to talk about, but it never, ever, ever, I don't have a list of questions. I've done one podcast with a list of questions. I think I got to like 4 of 15 questions. So that obviously was never going to go the way that I had listed it out. But I wonder if, I have 3 more questions for you, if I could remember them. See how my brain works. One question is, how did you guys, I've had someone write to me and say, all of these conversations with these women are amazing. And so many of the women I have on the podcast are entrepreneurs, just because those are the waters that I swim in, as do you. Not exclusively, but it's certainly how we met. And one of the questions was, well, how does all of this work financially? Like, how do you figure this out? And you had a really thriving business before you decided to homeschool. That shifted things. Your husband has has his profession. And how did you set yourself up when you became a mom, when you put your coaching on hold, when you did all of these things and you made this huge move north and into the woods, and you chose this life consciously? How did you make that work financially?
So for the homeschooling thing, since it's only been a year, that's the most recent one I can speak to. But it really comes down to, again, the conscious transition. So one of the reasons I said hell no when we first started considering it was because I couldn't see how I was going to be the kind of homeschooling mom that I wanted to be, and the kind of business owner that I wanted to be, and the kind of mother I wanted to be, and the kind of wife I wanted to be. And I still would love to have a social life. And by the way, I travel quite a bit for my business too. How in the world are we going to do that? So I made a few concessions consciously. One is I said no to 2 retreats this year that were fun, lucrative, but definitely like not passion. Like, oh my God, this is a heck yes. It was like great, this will be fun. And the one that was potentially making me sad that afterwards, I'm like, I really kind of wanted to do that. It didn't happen anyway. So I was like, phew, okay, that one wasn't going to happen, where I was going to be a guest facilitator. It wasn't my retreat. I said no to that one, but it didn't end up happening, which I felt a little bit of like a nod from the universe. Like, okay, great. You said no to that. That didn't happen. That was the one thing, was I did make a few concessions, mindful concessions of like, okay, if I really strip away the things that were sort of like fun, but not necessary, not super passionate, what would that look like? The next thing is to claim some time. Like, I knew for a fact that I would not give up Zumba. I would not give up my physical practices. I wouldn't give up my podcast. I wouldn't give up my circle. So I did a couple of things, which is I looked at the calendar and I actually changed our group calls to align with my calendar. And I was like, because my husband's like, well, it's your thing, right? Like, you're the leader, you can change it. Yeah, I could totally do that. That was really fun to look at it. And the ladies were like, okay, great. You just give us a calendar and we'll put it on our calendar. Because I was the one who put the original call calendar up anyway. Sure. So I just gave enough notice, and that's when the calls are. That was one thing. So I gave myself permission to create my way. The second thing was I defended the things that I really wanted. And there was even a point where Miles wanted to take a class on a Friday morning, which was one of my favorite Zumba classes. And I just sat there. I'm like, I love you. I know you want to take this class because your friend's taking it, but I really need to go to Zumba Friday morning. So it's not going to work this semester. And he's like, okay. So I defended my time. And I knew if I gave up that Zumba class, I would not be happy. Yeah. I really, really love to dance. And one of my favorite teachers teaches on this particular class. And so I just said, no, I'm putting my foot down. This is not negotiable. And they were both like, okay, great. So, we had
the sky didn't fall and you didn't.
The sky didn't fall. And I demonstrated for him what it looks like to be a woman and a mom in her power and in her truth and in her voice. And he was like, okay, great. I wasn't asking for permission. I just said, this is what's going to happen. And that's what it is for this semester. Next time we'll take a look at it again. And so the third thing is I got support. There's other homeschooling moms around me. I joined the community and I asked for help from my husband. I got a person who does, for my podcast, I don't do anything except record it. I have an editor who literally takes it off my plate and does everything.
So good.
Which is great. I am looking for a new VA. I had one. So I would say that's another part of it, is looking even for a few hours a week. There's things that I can take off my plate that I don't need to be doing. And I literally became this less is more mentality. I really embrace that now. And my big one thing is my circle. And so I'm like, wow, what if I only just did one thing and everything led to that? That makes it very easy to give myself permission to not constantly be creating new things, which I was in this cycle of for a long time. My virtual retreat academy and the 66 and the 21 and this constant creation, which is definitely, there's a phase to do that. But now I feel very at peace where I can see my calendar. I know exactly what's on it. I've got lots of spaciousness. Dream calendar is one of the things that we do in the circle. So I look ahead and I say, great. I look at my week as a container. I want to make sure I have one day for my recording podcasts and interviews, which is today. I have one day for my partnership meeting, which is tomorrow on Tuesday. On Wednesdays, I have my group calls. On Thursdays is my self-care day. And on Fridays, my family day. Like, that's my container. If I can stay with that, which it adjusts with my travel, but then I feel like I'm still doing my thing. I'm the owner of this business. I get to decide. I am the mother. I get to decide. Like, I've empowered myself with my magic wand where I get to decide how I want things to be.
Mm-hmm.
And then, going back to like, this time is not forever. He's in middle school for the next year or two. And then there's high school and then we're moving on. So I really, really, really want to enjoy this time in our life. And so if some things have to wait for a few years, I'm okay with that. I'm really okay with that. And if I really, really want to create something, how can I outsource what needs to be outsourced? Who can I hire? What can I do?
Yeah. And that's probably true for business and home and schooling and so on.
Yeah, I have a woman who comes to clean my house. I don't do that. I have someone who cleans my car. Like, there's things that I could be doing that would take my time that I've chosen to outsource and gift funding someone else.
Yes.
And I get to play with my son or work on my business or do other things. So outsourcing.
Or Zumba. Go to Zumba.
Zumba, yes.
So I have two more questions. I'm just mindful of time because I know you've got to jet off. So one question that I have, and it's hard to be concise with this one, I know, because there's so much information. And I bless and I'm grateful for everything that I learned when I was in the Divine Self-Care Circle all of those years ago, and still am happy to be in your orbit and continue to relearn lessons that I need to keep learning until I get in over and over again. What would you say is the one thing that you would recommend to any mama who is struggling in this resentment, martyrdom, guilt, too much, all the things, over responsibility, horribilizing, like thinking about all of the horrible things that might happen if she doesn't do all of these things because she's taking care of herself? What's the one thing you would say, if you do nothing else, do this thing? I know it's a really hard question.
I have two things, actually. I guess one is to give yourself permission to just lighten up on yourself a little bit, because you're doing the best you can with what you have. You don't know what you don't know until you know better. And then when you know better, you can do better or different or decide to do something altogether, upside down. Permission granting. I think there's a curiosity that happens when you're ready for a shift, that you're like, okay, I can see, you have enough distance from how you've been doing it that you're like, I see how I've been perpetuating my own sort of misery.
Yeah, totally.
Lack of better words, And so now that I can see that I have some control, that I have some empowerment here, what can I do now for myself? That's the first step. The second step is to connect the dots between, okay, I'm starting to notice that when I do 5 minutes of yoga, I come downstairs and I'm a more patient mom. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Wow, that's cool. Mm-hmm. Let me do more of that. So you start to, as soon as you make that connection, like, okay, so now I see that instead of self-care being this thing that I do when I make time someday, mm-hmm. I realize the importance of what kind of mom I want to be now: patient, present, playful. And I can only do that when I take time to be in my own space, to refuel myself, to take that bath when I want to call it a pizza night and not have to make a 10-course meal. Like, lighten up and allow yourself to actually enjoy, give yourself permission to enjoy it. That's step 2. So connecting the dots between self-care and being the kind of mom you choose to be. And the third thing is the how, which is, I would say, just start with the Magic Morning Practice. Like, it's a free video that gives you a ton of ideas of how to take anywhere from 3 minutes to an hour or more to take care of yourself. And literally, if you only have 3 minutes, it's where you start to come back to yourself and say, okay, how do I want to feel today? Mm-hmm. And if you just do nothing else besides say, how do I want to feel today? What's my intention? If your one intention is to be like, okay, today I want to be playful. How can I do that? Mm-hmm. And then you just show up as a different person. And so it's a journey, like, I think one of the things you said is really important is there's stories that we tell ourselves. We're constantly have the storyteller in our head. And if you can separate yourself from that just an inch to say, I am the one who's telling the story. And if that's true, then I can tell a different story.
Totally.
And then that takes that takes the mindful consciousness work. Really, that's where you dive into. That's why I think yoga sort of saved me, because I took a yoga teacher training course that was much more than just body. It was body and soul. And like, it was amazing. I just sort of remembered who I was, back deep, deep, deep in my soul, where I was like, oh, I can think things and reflect, and I can write things, and I can choose things. And you start to separate from that storyteller a little bit, the very human side of us, the ego-driven part of us,
that we all have.
Yeah. So it's a journey. You're not going to change everything overnight. I think there's quantum realizations that happen in a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, I've totally been in fear mode all this time. I want to do things differently. Let me figure out how to start doing that. And I have a list of books I recommend on my site under the resources tab. So like there's books you can read, there's practices you can do, but the very simple act of deciding that you're going to start practicing self-care, which is movement and nature and sitting and writing and reading a book for fun and taking a bath. There's a list of things, right?
Naps. I thought of you this morning. I got out of bed, sent my kids to school, and I had such a crappy night because I had nightmares. And my daughter had nightmares. And it was such an interrupted, crappy night that I asked my husband to take the kids to school. And I went to bed. I was back in bed at 10 to 8 and I slept until 9, thinking of you giving me permission to start my day off that way. So my last question, because we're really down to the wire for you with the time you have left, is where do you get your MamaFuel?
Oh, that's a great question. So many places. I think I get my MamaFuel with, it's like that rubber band moment, that perspective of understanding that this is a very specific time in my life and I want to enjoy it. And I'm not always going to get it right. And I'm going to apologize a lot if I yell or whatever. But mostly, for the most part, I get to have this experience. I remember the moment of standing in my bathroom and wanting to be pregnant. It's going to make me emotional. I remember wanting this baby so badly. I'm like, I want to have this experience. I choose to be a mother. I want to have this. And if I die right now, I will be so sad that I haven't had this experience. And so I consciously call it in. And if that's true, and if I did consciously call it in, then why not enjoy it? Not every single moment of it, but a lot of it. Like, I'm human, but I chose this. I get to experience it. I'm grateful for it. Have there been moments of extreme terror? Of course. The like late night broken bone emergency rooms. Of course. Those are like your heart just breaks. And then there've been moments of intense, like just sitting on the couch, giggling, watching a movie, connecting, laughing together. I mean, that's so beautiful. So I think like everything else, gratitude is that thing that brings you back to like, oh, wait a minute. I get to do this. I get to start a business. I get to be a mother. I get to be a human with all the messiness and all the chaos. I am not a victim of my own circumstance. I am the creator of the circumstance, which is where sort of the self-care practices really help to fuel you up to do that. And so I love the name of your podcast because I talk about that. Like you wouldn't expect to drive your car cross country on an empty tank without stopping for gas and snacks and water and pee, right? But we do that all the time as moms. We expect that we can just go without refueling our own tanks. And so for me, gratitude is that like, fill her up. Oh, wait a minute. I get to do this. What am I grateful for right now? I'm grateful for my health, my home, this experience, the lessons, my friends. Okay.
This day, I get another day.
So I would say gratitude. That is the magic perspective shifter, and the faster you can get out of victim mode and remember that you chose this, even if you got pregnant unexpectedly, you still chose it at some level, right? You're here.
You were there.
And you were there. And if you feel like there are things in your life that sort of happen to you, I totally get that. Absolutely get that. And still you can come from a place of gratitude, of learning of, wow, that was a really screwed up lesson, but I learned it. And how can I move this forward?
Yeah.
Right?
Elena, I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours. I'm so giddy and grateful. Speaking of grateful, to have had this opportunity to have a conversation with you. It's late night and my tongue and brain are working together all that well. That nap is now feeling far away. I'm just really grateful for you, for the work that you do, for you giving me permission way back when I needed it from someone outside of me to take time for myself without tying myself into all of the knots and creating all of the drama around, but I need time for myself, which is what it used to sound like. And now it's like, hey, I'm going to do this thing for myself. Now I'm going to have this nap or take this bath or do this exercise routine or go for this run or go away for a weekend. I'm flying to Canada for 3 days in June and I can't wait. I just said, this weekend I need you to be home because I'm going to be away. And I'm so excited. So thank you. I will put some links in the show notes so that people can find you and your amazing work. And I wish you a beautiful, beautiful day out where you are.
Thank you so much for having me. So beautiful. I love the conversation. Thank you for doing your work too.
Oh, thank you. I received that and I love you. I hope you enjoyed today's episode with the amazing Elena Lipson, her conversation about homeschooling her son and how she takes such exquisite care of herself and listens to herself is something that always inspires me every time that I speak to her, when we had this conversation, and anytime I see anything that Elena puts out into the world. I am so grateful that our paths crossed and that she became my first teacher in really deep self-care and self-love practices. This is the first in a series of interviews and conversations and solo shows on the topic of self-love and self-care for this month of October. And because we are talking about self-care, I would like to reiterate my invitation to you to join me and other amazing mamas in the founders circle of the MamaFuel Sisterhood. We are a small but mighty group who are going to be shaping what will grow to be a large global community of mamas who come into the sisterhood as a conscious step towards themselves. So if you feel called to join an amazing group of women who, for $25 a month, come into a community that I am nurturing, where we fill our hearts, our souls, our minds, and our bodies, where we are witnessed, where we are celebrated, where we are held, where we are nurtured and cared for, then drop me a note at Anne, ANNE, at MamaFuel.me. That's MAMAFUEL.me. Or go to thecenteredmamaproject.com/Facebook, and that will take you to the virtual village, the Centered Mamas virtual village. And from there, you can just PM me on the Facebook platform if that's something that works better for you. You are more than welcome to have a good look around at the sisterhood until the 14th of October. And if you are listening to this afterward, the sisterhood is always running, but the doors aren't always open because I want to protect that space and allow everybody to really get to know each other. So best to drop me an email at Anne, ANNE, at mamafuel.me and let me know if you would like to join, and I can tell you when the doors will next be opening. If you have any questions, drop me a line. And if you have any feedback, I'm always super excited to receive it about this episode or any of the preceding ones. I cannot wait to be back in your earbuds next week with episode 2 of the Self-Love series. Have a gorgeous week, beauty. That's it for today's episode of MamaFuel, the podcast. Thanks for listening. There's a lot more conversation, sharing, and real mama talk happening in our private Facebook group. To join us, go to www.thecenteredmamaproject.com/Facebook and make sure you say hi when you get there. If you like this episode, or if you know a mama who could use a little mama fuel, I'd love you to share this episode and to rate and leave a review. Every comment helps, and it is always a delight to hear from you. Thanks, and bye for now.